The countdown to E3 is well and truly on the way, and more publishers are starting to reveal their plans for their showcases at E3 this year. So I think it's time I start delving into specific publishers, specific companies, and predicting what I think their entire press conferences will look like. Sony revealed a few weeks ago that their conference will be focusing on 4 huge first-party exclusives that we already know about, being The Last of Us Part 2, Death Stranding, Ghost of Tsushima, and Spider-Man. I think with this they're attempting to set some level of expectations for fans, meaning I think and I predict there will be no actual brand new first party exclusive surprise to be shown at this year's E3. Quite frankly, because the vast majority of Sony's first party studios are either hard at work on an upcoming game, or it hasn't been long enough from their last game for them to have anything realistically to show. A perfect example of this is Guerrilla Games. There's absolutely, in my mind at least, no chance that we'll see any word of a Horizon sequel, which is definitely what they're going to be working on right now. We might hear about that in 2019 or even perhaps 2020. So Sony is clearly trying to temper expectations to some degree about the first party exclusives. However, I still think they could potentially have some third party surprise reveals to show. At the conference, I think there's a chance that some third-party players could show up and that could be where the big surprises from the conference come from, perhaps Cyberpunk 2077 or Red Dead Redemption 2 gameplay. Even though I highly doubt Rockstar would take part in E3 this year because they never normally do, that is a possibility, which I think would be quite surprising. But overall, I don't think there'll be any shocking reveals for PS4 exclusives like we got in 2016, but instead we could get some third-party surprises. But I do want to predict what I think the entire conference will look like. I wanted to discuss exactly what will be shown from each game and where exactly they'll be placed in the conference itself. So I'm going to start off at the beginning of the conference, and I'm going to make a prediction that is, in my opinion, quite ballsy, because I think the obvious call to kick off this showcase would probably be something like Death Stranding, something we know and have been excited to see gameplay for 2 years now. But I think because we've only seen one trailer from Sucker Punch's Ghost of Tsushima at Paris Games Week 2017, I've got a feeling that game is going to really impress at E3 this year, and I've got a feeling Sony's really confident in what Sucker Punch has been working on over the past 4 years or so. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think the conference will open with a Ghost of Tsushima gameplay demo, which I think will be awesome to see. From what we've seen in the original trailer, the setting looks really interesting. There's a lot of really cool possibilities for where they could take the gameplay there. So I think showing that first could generate a lot of interest in it, while also leaving some more of the heavy hitters or some more stuff that we're anticipating as fans a little bit more than Ghost of Tsushima, leaving that to later in the conference. We'll probably have some third-party stuff, whether it be trailers, sizzle reels, or even some potential third-party reveals as well, all sprinkled throughout this conference. But in terms of what I think the next first-party game that will be shown, I think we're going to see Death Stranding gameplay somewhere in the middle of the conference. Kojima has been teasing a trailer that will be revealed at E3 on his Twitter recently, and I personally think that it would be kind of crazy if they were to show yet another cinematic story-based trailer that leaves everyone confused once again. Even though I thought those original 3 trailers that we've seen of the game have been really cool, I think it would start to become a bit of a joke if we get a 4th one. At this point, if they're going to show anything at all, which Kojima has been teasing, I think it has to be gameplay. So I think we're going to get a gameplay trailer for Death Stranding, which will hopefully reveal more about what we're actually going to be doing in the game, and perhaps show off what the gameplay will be like and what the open world will be like, because Hideo Kojima has said in the past that the game is open world. But I'm excited to see more because the premise looks super weird and quirky and interesting, and the world itself and the characters, it all looks very bizarre, but I'm really into it. So I look forward to actually hopefully at least gaining somewhat of an understanding of what Death Stranding is about. At the time of E3, Spider-Man will only be a few months away from release, and they showed an extensive gameplay demo last year to close the conference, so I don't think they'll waste time with a Spider-Man gameplay demo again, just because there's going to be a lot of other gameplay to get through with first-party exclusives this year. So I think we'll probably get a very brief Spider-Man story story trailer perhaps, just to get everyone excited for the release that will take place in September a few months later. I think the same can be said for Days Gone at the conference as well. If you'd asked me a few months ago, I would have thought that Days Gone will probably almost definitely get a gameplay demo again, much like in 2016 and 17. However, Game Informer just this month has released a lot of alpha gameplay, in fact over an hour's worth. It was pretty extensive gameplay of the opening hours of the game. So I highly doubt they would have Game Informer reveal such extensive gameplay and then do the same thing again at E3. So this makes me think at E3 we'll probably get another story trailer for Days Gone, perhaps with a release window accompanying it sometime in 2019. I think early 2019, around where God of War or Horizon released in that March-February time slot would fit it very well. Because I'm not really a huge fan of the Days Gone gameplay, but I think the premise of the game, in terms of the protagonist being a part of a bikie gang in a post-apocalyptic setting, I think that is quite interesting. So I think personally a new story trailer showing off some more of the characters and the dynamics and how the game's going to play from a narrative perspective could definitely pique my own interest, along with hopefully a lot of other gamers out there as well. Talking specifically third party now, at the Game Awards last year, Shadows Die Twice was a new project teased from Software, and since then we've had absolutely no news as to what exactly it is. I've speculated in my past E3 predictions video that Shadows Die Twice is Bloodborne 2, and I'm sticking by that, even though it could very well not be Bloodborne 2 and be shown off at Microsoft's conference potentially. I'm going to stick by my guns and say that Shadows Die Twice was indeed Bloodborne 2, and thus will be shown at this conference with a gameplay trailer. People love the original Bloodborne, so that's a surefire way to get people into the conference and certainly excited about a Bloodborne 2. Because even though there's plenty of upcoming PS4 exclusives, that would be one that fans would definitely be ecstatic about. But whether or not it is Bloodborne 2 and whether or not it is at Sony's stage, I think it's definitely going to be at E3 somewhere regardless. But I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to say it's at Sony's stage. It's a part of the PlayStation conference somewhere in the middle. Before I get to what I think will close the show, I want to touch on Dreams from Media Molecule. This game is a very peculiar case because it was announced years upon years ago and it disappeared forever, and then it came back at PSX this last year. But honestly, it's about time we get a release date for Dreams, but that game does not demo well at all. It's still very hard to explain what exactly that game is, so we're not going to get any kind of extensive gameplay trailer or anything like that. I think we will get a short trailer for Dreams that will hopefully confirm a release date down the road, and I'm going to say that release date's going to be probably later this year in 2018. I think they just need to get the game out at this point, which I know sounds kind of stupid considering I'm always all for letting developers have all the time they need, but Dreams is a very peculiar case because it's been worked on for so long and because it's a very unique concept for a game. I feel like they should just try and get it out now at this point. Maybe late 2018, December maybe, or perhaps January 2019, that could be a good spot for it as well. And to no one's surprise, I think a gameplay demo for The Last of Us Part 2 will close the conference, and my main reason for that is because Naughty Dog just tends to close lots of these shows, or pretty much all of them actually. The two times that we've seen The Last of Us Part 2 so far, they've closed the show for Paris Games Week and PSX. Basically, anytime Naughty Dog shows up with something, it normally closes the show, especially with something as big as The Last of Us 2. This is by no means any kind of crazy prediction, it's very safe actually, but there's a reason it's a safe prediction, and that's because it's probably going to happen. We're going to get a nice gameplay demo, probably from a pretty extensive section of the game, similar to what we saw from Spider-Man last year. I'd expect around about a 10-minute demo from the game to close the conference, because that is what Sony has been doing the last few years. They've had demos closing conferences as opposed to trailers, so I think that trend will continue with The Last of Us. And continuing with Sony's relatively new trend of not revealing a lot of release dates at E3, I think that this trailer will end with 2019 and nothing else. It'll confirm what any sort of logic could basically figure out, and that is that The Last of Us Part 2 will come out in 2019, probably sometime in the middle of the year, between June and August I would say. But Sony has been more hesitant as of late to put specific release dates on games when they are a year or so out. So I think it'll end with a 2019 release window, and then we won't get a specific date until probably next year or late this year. Regardless, I'm super excited for E3 this year, as I always am. I always get so excited for E3 because it's an exciting time of year for video game fans. I don't think Sony's press conference this year can blow anyone out of the water necessarily. There could be some cool third-party reveals, but whether or not this conference will be good will rely on how good the gameplay and the trailers that are shown are. We're almost definitely not going to get any first-party surprises, which it is disappointing, but I'm fine with it as long as we get really good looks at these games. I'm curious to see how The Last of Us Part 2 will play. I'm very, very curious to see how Death Stranding will play as well. So I think this year's E3 for Sony will play similar to last year, where there's not a ton of surprises that blow people away, so people are going to probably be underwhelmed to some extent. But hey, you never know, I could be totally wrong, and they could throw out some really cool random surprises that no one saw coming. But I do suggest you keep your expectations in check when it comes to those surprises. But we definitely should be excited for these gameplay demos and trailers that we're going to see. So those are my predictions specifically for PlayStation's conference. Please let me know what you think of my predictions and leave your own in the comments section down below. This has been Sir Kaz. Farewell.